Surviving Compton exposes Michel'le's abuse by Dr. Dre. You may have seen the biopic on Lifetime, and whew, wow, it trended #1. People were tweeting in. We'll get to some of those tweets, right? So if you have not seen it, I highly suggest you do. Now, keep in mind, it is a Lifetime biopic. So like Brett, I think, was a little shocked because it has some cheese element. It does. You have to embrace it. More importantly, you're learning her side of the story, because when Straight Outta Compton came out, you don't get to see anything about Michel'le. And Michel'le was a big part of that whole movement. NWA, signed by Ruthless Records, Eazy-E. So let's take a look. First of all, if you don't really remember who Michel'le is, maybe you'll recognize this song. So let's listen to this song first.
Say you love me, and I think that is true. But every night my girlfriend tells me I should watch you.
I loved her. That song she wrote, No More Lies, because Dr. Dre was cheating on her at the time, according to her. And if you watch the biopic, you see the abuse. And a lot of people on social media were surprised. So not only did she suffer abuse allegedly from Dr. Dre, but also from Suge Knight. A lot of people expected that from Suge Knight. So when social media erupted, and again, we'll go over some of those tweets and Instagram posts, people did not understand this type of abuse. So in the biopic, according to Michel'le, she not only was open fired, by Dr. Dre, but strangled, but beat. And she had a baby with Dr. Dre. They were together for 5 years. This was all during the rise of Dr. Dre. So again, when I say that she was an artist by her own right, she had a gold record. She was recording with NWA. All of that was left out of Straight Outta Compton. So she had her own biopic, which was on Lifetime. And before we get into other abuse allegations, because this is, to some people, and Kenny and I were talking about this in the kitchen before we started Pop Trigger, to some people out there, these abuse allegations are nothing new, because it's not just Michel'le that is alleging this. It's eyewitnesses from the studios. Other band group members that Dr. Dre has performed with have come out saying, yeah, I used to witness him beat her or this girl all the time. Other artists and a TV host named Dee Barnes. So we're going to get into those allegations too. So again, these are just allegations. However, when you have this much of a history of allegations and this many eyewitnesses that can corroborate it, you better believe I believe it. You better believe that I was watching that going, what a piece of shit. And I immediately went on the internet and I immediately looked to see what Dee Barnes' story was and what this person's story was and what this eyewitness said at the club and what this eyewitness said in the studio and what Eazy-E said. All these people that have worked with Dr. Dre, all saying the same thing.
How does it go on? That's the thing, is how does this happen? How? I don't know. It's weird. And then you find yourself as someone sitting here getting an email from Sam Bing saying, go watch this Lifetime movie that is terrible.
It's a Lifetime movie. You got to welcome the cheese.
Every Lifetime documentary, I think, is horrible.
It isn't even a documentary. It's like
that part.
It's like quasi docu soap drama.
Yeah.
Well, that's Lifetime.
Regardless, I'm
That's
sitting there
Lifetime.
and I'm like, what am I supposed to do? And I think the answer is what you did, is go do your research, go find out about it. But really, what's my recourse as someone? I know that I'm part of the larger discourse for whatever Michel'le wants us to do, because she has now. Hopefully she's going down the court of law, and now she's turning to the court of public opinion. I know that that's part of it, but I think the court of law is a good place for her to go. She went on TMZ and said...
That's right. I have that right here. But first of all, I'm not sure if she now... I don't know if it's exceeded the limit.
That's the thing. It's why was there no lawsuit back then?
You're scared, dude. There's so many women, doctor.
So then the next step is listen.
But you can't blame women. Sometimes it takes them 7. Any psychiatrist, doctor will say it could take battered women syndrome, and men. Men get abused too, but it can take 7 or 8 times of leaving that person before they finally get the courage to leave that person, because they're fearful, they're insecure, and really quickly, I just have to touch on the fact that in the biopic, they mentioned this transgenerational trauma that exists. So the grandmother dealt with it. The mother dealt with it. It was a little bit more prevalent in Compton because of the oppression and the anger. And so that's what she at least said in the biopic. And that makes you not, I don't condone it, but it makes you understand it.
And there's I would say, and I can save from my personal experience in my family and my grandmother and people that, I have a lot of family that grew up in Mississippi where my father's from. Not my father or no men that I know directly, actually my mother's brother and a few others. So in the black community, that was always been a problem, but it's different. And I'm not playing a race card here, but it's different from, white households and people that would stand up for each other. It's in those times, the police were against you. You were going through a lot of other things in society. So what happens in your home has stayed in your home. And a lot of women didn't have the courage. I think in her situation, it was more of a street thing. NWA was on their rise. Dre was coming out with the Chronic after that point. Like, there was a lot of stuff that was going on, but you still had, this was in Compton when you had, it was after the Watts riots, but this is when it was in the heart of the Bloods and the Crips, and like, there's a lot of gangster stuff that was going on that like, you either gonna get shot, you're gonna die, or whatever else. So there was more of a fear of just coming out. This was, I gotta walk around in the streets. I got kids now, like, it's a lot of other factors.
There's
that
a lot of substance
you
abuse
necessarily
problems
didn't have to
too.
deal with. Yeah, she had her own substance abuse.
He had a substance abuse problem.
Yeah.
She had a substance abuse problem.
Yeah, for sure. I just wouldn't underestimate the ability of white people to like pretend something's not happening, because that happens too. But yes,
Right,
definitely,
but-
I totally get it. It's tough, and it's a weird position to be in as someone
Yeah.
who's just watching this show. And I think the thing to take from it is, like, I don't think she's lying, and I think that if you are in a situation like this, the faster you move to make a change or take action, the better. And that's what we can learn from it. I think it's also interesting to see all this stuff playing out through like biopics. Because this is, and it's the way you kind of need to do it now to get people to listen. This is I know I've conditioned myself to be the person who didn't like read The Great Gatsby. I just watched the movie, Like, that's how people get their information. And I think a lot of folks stop right there.
Yeah.
And it's that tennis match of like, oh, Dre's right. Oh, Michel'le's right. What does Dre have to say?
We're gonna give you some We're gonna give you some more context. But
Well,
Grace,
you know what I liked about this biopic, and I hear you on the cheese factor, and I didn't really know who Michel'le was before watching it, and her voice did take a bit of an adjustment.
Well,
because
talk about that. So her
I wasn't
speaking
her
voice-
speaking voice is very high pitched,
very different from her singing voice, which you heard is like
Yeah.
amazing and strong.
So this was totally new to me, and I thought that she actually presented it in a pretty decent way. She says that was their side of the story. They were allowed to make their movie, and this is my movie, and this is how I want to do it. And so it was interesting to see both sides of the story, even though I did find myself as someone who didn't remember this happening in a tennis match. Well, they said this in Straight Outta Compton, but this is what her movie says, and this is that.
they
and
didn't
this
bring
is that.
her up, period, in Straight Outta
And I
Compton.
thought
That's
that
what's
was-
bullshit, because she was a big part of Ruthless, NWA, and that whole movement. She was touring with them. She was dropping tracks with them. She was singing the hooks on their records. She was engaged to him. They had a baby together. She's not mentioned at
And
all in
that's what I
Straight Outta
thought was
Compton.
so
Come
interesting.
on.
And when I'm watching in the opening of the movie, so for those of you that haven't seen it, it's a biopic, but the actual Michel'le comes in certain scenes to sort of narrate, like next to the actress that's playing her, what's going on and how she's feeling, and sort of explaining different actions, which is it's sometimes cheesy, but also
those shots.
sometimes
The whole
very-
time, I
shots-
had
yeah,
to
those
stop
some of those
watching. It was
shots.
such
Okay,
a
but
shitty
sometimes
movie.
it's a little bit powerful, but I thought it was
cried.
But
I saw a real woman who went through all this shit, and you saw her eyes well up, even at the end. And yeah, the narration it could come off cheesy, but I cried. I thought that this was cathartic for her, and I thought that,
And
I don't know.
But I do think it was so interesting to me that her story was, seemingly just was so true to her. Just meant so much to her, and that it was totally excluded and Straight Outta Compton was another thing that I found it very interesting. I wish I had a better word for it.
Yeah.
It's a little bit suspicious that. She wasn't included at all, or a lot of these women that have alleged abuse from
Let's
Dr. Dre
talk
weren't
about them.
included at all. So
let's talk about
I
them.
wonder why.
So there is, so first of all, again, there's these women, but then these were in public places. So there's been a number of eyewitnesses that were at each of these public places that have also attested to witnessing this. So we have Tari B. And Tari B was a singer, and according to Tari B, she says, and this is on thoughtcatalog.com, apparently daring not to invite him to collaborate on her first album, The Power of a Woman, which was released by Eazy-E's label, Dre confronted her at the 1990 Grammy Awards. There, he punched her in the face twice, according to Tari. Quote, he hit me like Tyson, but I took it and I don't know how. Now, Dee Barnes, this one is a very public. A lot of people witnessed this. Dee Barnes was a radio host and rapper herself back in the late 80s, the early 90s. She was the host of Pump It Up, if you remember. So she did an interview with Ice Cube for Pump It Up, and that ticked off Dr. Dre because this was when Ice Cube had left NWA, correct?
Yeah. It was right after Cube had left. There was already a lot of tension between Ice Cube's lynch mob and NWA, which you saw that there was a fight in Straight Outta Compton when they were coming down the escalator, and that's what that was. But during the midst of all of that, Cube did a video, because there was Yo MTV Raps with Fab Five Freddy, and then Pump It Up. Those are like the two big hip hop shows that everybody watched.
I remember Pump It Up.
So this interview, like they were walking through Compton, walking on like the train tracks and everything, and Cube was saying what he was saying, and D was saying all that, because they weren't giving him credit. And Ice Cube wrote majority of NWA records.
Yes.
So,
And so what happened with Dee, so then Dee walks into a Hollywood club, and according to her, she said, quote, Dre felt like Barnes made NWA look bad, and a few months later in 1991, Dre bumped into her at a party where he grabbed her by the hair, smashed her face into a wall. This was in the middle of the club. This wasn't like in some dark corner. Then when she went down on the ground from that, he started kicking her in the ribs and stomping on her hands. When she ran away to hide in the bathroom, he followed her in there, started hitting her in the head. There, she actually filed a police report. There were charges brought against him. Those charges were dropped because they had a settlement, okay? Now we have Michel'le. We know the Michel'le story, the biopic. Well, maybe it's just easier to make it go away.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing.
Maybe for some people, it's just easier to make it go away.
Right, and so that kind of explains why she kind of, if we had a settlement, good, but now, years later, he's releasing, I mean, he's involved in the Straight Outta Compton film, and there's nothing about that.
Right, right.
So-
Well, let me get through this list really quick. Michel'le, we know her story. If you have not seen the biopic, this is what Michel'le, she sums it up. She says that Dre beat her so badly that she had to have reconstructive surgery done on her nose. Her ribs were broken, and she used to have to wear makeup to cover the black eyes his beatings would give her. And then there are actually a number of, I left the paper at home, but there were a number of different rappers, and because he was in like a boy band rap group too, way back in the day.
World Class Wrecking Crew.
World Class Wrecking Crew. One of those former members, his name is Clientele. He said when he was asked about the Dee Barnes incident, he said, quote, she wasn't the first one. I know of a few others. I seen him get raw dog with a couple females, and we'd have conversations about this stuff, and I told him, that ain't how I roll. Eazy-E too. Eazy-E never agreed with the way that Dr. Dre
Actually, Easy put
treated.
that in a lyric so Dre came out with Compton, with The Chronic. On that album, there's a song called Dre Day. The Dre Day song is him and Snoop rapping, and they're talking about Easy, Tim Dog, everybody they had beef with. Easy's response to that song was called, I'm trying to think of the edited version, Real Compton City G's. And in that, there was a line where Easy pretty much saying, beating on a woman don't make you a man, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes at him about other things as well.
Yeah, he always encouraged Michel'le to leave Dr. Dre because of the way he treated her,
Easy
according to Michel'le.
Easy was, I mean, as you know, I didn't know him personally, obviously, but from everything that you read and everything you see, and obviously, you know, God bless his soul, he died of AIDS, but he was like a lover. He was a gangster in the streets. He sold dope and everything else, and he would fight a dude. But girls, he just wanted to have, you know, sexual relations with and just be with all the women. He loved women. So he was never like that type of person.
How come people don't talk about, I mean, now we're talking about it. Last year when Straight Outta Compton came out, people were talking about Dr. Dre and all the allegations, but how come it went unnoticed? At least in my mind, it went unnoticed all these years. And then how come when Straight Outta Compton came out, it wasn't made a bigger deal about? I mean, here we were celebrating this film, which it was a great film, but they left out a huge part of it.
They suppressed a lot of it. F. Gary Gray, who directed Straight Outta Compton. Well, first of all, Straight Outta Compton was Dre and Ice Cube's story. It was their take on it, their story on it. F. Gary Gray directed it. They were saying that they didn't have enough time film-wise to really put everything in. Obviously, if I'm putting a film out, I'm not going to show the worst part of myself. But I want to pose another question that has had me thinking because it's so relevant now. Nate Parker just came out with Birth of a Nation, and his rape allegations from 1999 surfaced up. But this is not the first lead role that he's had in a film. He's done Red Tails and Beyond the Lights and some of these other films. But now it completely tanked him. And they're like, oh, he handled all the interviews wrong. And I bring that up because I feel like that there's, you know, I hold domestic violence, rape, and all these things against women all on the same plateau. But is it in the culture that we live in now where raping a woman or sexual assault allegations is held worse than a man that's beating a woman in a domestic violence situation.
Right.
Because Birth of a Nation completely tanked.
Right.
Straight Outta Compton broke records, and they're gonna do a whole, there's a Tupac film coming out now, All Eyes on Me, and that opened up a whole world of let's keep telling all the stories of Death Row and Pac in that '90s time. So is it a disconnect? Do people think that being accused of rape, because a woman can accuse a man of rape like that, and he can be found not guilty, but he'll still have that stigma on him, as in Nate's case. And his film completely bombed. They completely trashed everything. They brought it up in every interview. But
Yeah, I
when
think
Dre
that's why
and
you
Cube
always
were
have to look
doing-
at history.
When Dre and Cube were doing that, though,
Right. I know. And then there's a history attached to
there was
Dre.
a whole history about it. Wendy Williams brought it up, and
Yeah.
then Dre didn't go on Wendy Williams because of that. Ice Cube went on there promoting the film, and Cube did a lot of the promotions, and they kept Dre away from it because of that. They didn't want the questions coming out.
Cube is
Unbelievable.
still awesome, right? He's cool. I get to
There's
like
been
him.
no allegations that
He
I'm
said I get
aware
to
of.
like
I
There's
just
no
don't want to
allegations
stop
that
liking
I'm
him
aware
because
of.
I really like him.
Yeah.
Wait, you worked with Dr. Dre. Are you allowed to talk
I worked.
about that
I
at
worked
all,
on the
or-
Beats Music and stuff. But I mean, I've met him a few times and seen him. But and like I said, I already knew the history of that, as there are other guys that I don't want to just put people out there, but Brian McKnight has been another one has a long history of abusing his wives.
So that's it. It's only when someone has a spotlight on them do I think. I mean, that how I would work is if someone gets famous and they were shitty to me and I tried to bring it up before, but now that person's super famous, like how do they? I mean, most of our justice system is like if you do something bad happens to you, and it feels so unjust. And as it taps into the general public's view that if someone gets that high, if you see like a Bill Cosby who gets gets to be everybody's like idealistic dad figure, having done all this stuff, like why wouldn't we explore all these things? It's sad that the statute of limitations is shorter than it seems. Clinically, it's been proven it takes women to feel comfortable enough to bring charges. We can fix that. I think
Right.
we do need to fix that.
I agree.
I understand that the limitations are in place because then you need to be able to actually prove it with physical evidence. And I think the way to fight that is to just say, everyone, if you're in this situation, act at that time.
That's what I'm.
And it seems like she did, and if she got a settlement for this Dre thing, that's what the settlement is for, to put it
Well,
to
Dee
bed.
Barnes, yeah, and
That's
Michel'le,
the reporter,
she
yeah.
would consult with like her grandmother and like her mom and her grandmother. They because of what they went through in their generation. They made it normative to her, like to deal with it. But what I liked about the biopic is Michel'le at the very end said, "Do not put up with it." She taught her children not to put up with it. And then in all the commercial breaks, they had a PSA about if you are a victim right now, if you're going through a domestic violence, that you speak up. There's people there to help you. They gave resources for help, and I'm so happy that they did just
She
that.
said that's how she understood love growing up, and that she
Right. You
she
witnessed
thought
it.
that if he was beating her, it's because he loved her so much.
It's so insane.
I know we have to wrap up, but I feel like we should talk about a little bit that he has issued an apology.
Yeah,
but
I
do
have
we
that, yeah.
feel that he has taken responsibility? Because reading through this whole story, a theme that I started thinking about was forgiveness. So he's been married for 19 years now. We don't know sort of the behind the scenes of how that marriage is, or if his current wife has come forward with any allegations. I don't know about it.
Because
But
they
what
also showed him when he first got married to her, going back to Michel'le for that last part. And this is this current wife.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it just, to me, it's, his actions against these women are horrible, and he absolutely needs to take responsibility, and
Well,
I don't know if
his apology is a little bullshit because
Yeah,
his
his apology
actions
is
today,
bullshit.
his actions today don't support what he said a year ago. So a year ago, when these allegations came out, when Straight Outta Compton came out, and Dee Barnes was like, "What? How is this not portrayed in Straight Outta Compton?" When Michel'le said, "How am I not portrayed in Straight Outta Compton?" Then he did issue an apology, and it said, I don't have it in front of me, but it was very brief, and it said, "I apologize to the women that I have hurt."
Yeah, and I was
Okay.
young, and I was
Yep.
wrong.
Now, according to TMZ, Dre issued a cease and desist letter against Sony Pictures because of the scenes he said were inaccurate, and his lawyer said that they deny the abuse allegations. So Michel'le has come forward saying, "I don't get it. You apologized a year ago. Now you're trying to sue, denying these allegations." And according to Dre's lawyer, the letter states that Michel'le never sought legal recourse for the alleged abuse and never received medical treatment for injuries, therefore was never abused.
Which is
So
doesn't hold
that's
up.
the stupidest, to say just because somebody didn't go seek medical attention or somebody didn't go seek, go to the police department doesn't mean that they weren't abused.
But the ability, like that's a lawyer making that statement. That's how the law operates.
Yeah.
So it sadly is on you to make sure that you put together a case if this is happening, because otherwise this is what happens. And most people don't have the cachet or the resources to make a biopic on Lifetime or have a general theatrical release. So if you're not one of these people, like they get to do like, I'm gonna make Straight Outta Compton, I'm gonna make Surviving Compton, and then fight it out in the greater
The
court
court
of public opinion.
Man, those
But-
tweets and Instagram posts, like, did you want to share some of those before
But you
we
don't.
go?
But the
Yeah.
thing is, like, you don't have that recourse. You don't have those resources. So you need to do the things that it seems like this lawyer is pointing out are used in a case to get what you need, justice.
One theme that I saw reoccurring on Twitter was people bringing up gangster rap and whether or not that the misogynistic lyrics were influencing people, or was it just simply representing the same thing about what was going on within that culture. So let me read a couple tweets. This is from Tanisha C. Ford. She said, what would the history of hip hop or gangster rap look like if it was told completely through the experiences of women? And then there was a number of tweets that echoed that. And Michel'le talked about that too, not only in the biopic, but then after the biopic on Lifetime, there was a documentary. And there was a number of women that were a part of that whole scene and said that the lyrics were simply mirroring some of the behavior. Of course, we know that Eazy-E and other gangster rappers did not condone that behavior at all, but then you see like the lyrics from Dre, and then that did mirror his behavior. So what do you guys think about that assessment?
I mean, yeah, sure. I don't know. It's tough. Are people singing about what's happening in their lives? Yes. It seemed like that was the main
But is that
thrust, as what I
influencing
learned
other
from
people?
Straight Outta Compton.
Is
It
that
was just-
influencing other people?
I think it
Is it-
normalizes it. If you hear people singing about
Hitting a bitch
hitting a
and-
bitch or whatever, I mean, I don't know hitting a bitch, but like if you hear people sing about violence and whatnot, then it's like then you hear it, you're like, oh well, they're experiencing it too. I'm experiencing it. This is a normal thing, and even for girls as well to hear it, it's like, oh, the abuse that I am experiencing is a thing that happens. And I know that because these artists that I like and listen to are also singing about it, so it must be more common than it absolutely should be.
And it's on us to normalize taking a stand against it. So if you think that because people sing about it, it's okay to keep happening, no, that's not okay to keep happening. And people take their problems and use music as an outlet to express that. While that may make them feel good to use music to do it and get the message out, it means nothing if people who are actually in that situation don't take action.
Kenny?
So take
Well,
action.
at the same time, I do think that music, period, changes your vibe. If you're listening to, easy listening to R&B, you want to be in a romantic mood. If you're listening to a lot of this rap, and when gangster rap was out at that point and given that mystique, there were people like C. Dolores Tucker. There were civil rights activists that were coming out against a lot of the lyrics and how, they were referring to a bitch, a hoe, a slut, or different words that they were using. So I do think that it could have had an effect on a lot of people, but I feel like it's the weak-minded people that it actually gets to, and they start trying to emulate like they're tough like that.
And it also represented a lot of anger, like you mentioned. There was so much anger from all the oppression. Again, it doesn't mean that we condone it, but it makes us understand it.
Yeah.
It's this vicious cycle, this as they mentioned in the show, this transgenerational trauma that is just carried on from all these years of oppression and anger. And
it's all
sad.
of it. All of this stuff that was going on that we were speaking about. Rodney King happened during this time. Yeah. Then the whole Reginald Denny thing, and then the LA riots. All
and
of
the
this
mistreatment,
was all
the
in
police
same-
brutality, the police brutality in Compton.
This was all in the same thing
Right.
that's going on. So you got household stuff, you got blood and Crip and streets and gangs, and there was so many other factors that were going on. That where certain other people grew up didn't have to deal with a lot of those things.
And substance abuse has a lot to do with it. I know
So,
a number of
ton
people
of it.
I've
Especially,
interviewed and
drinking, alcohol.
Right,
Like she said,
yeah.
she was taking pills
Yeah.
to numb herself so it wouldn't hurt that much, just so
Right.
she could get through it.
Right, and
which
he
is
was
the same-
drinking, which people act a lot different.
Yeah.
Again, not to excuse it, but people act a lot different when they are sober than when they are using.
Yeah.
So, Michel'le, I'm glad that your voice is heard. You are courageous, and to echo what Brett said, if you are currently going through this, please seek help. And there's a lot of resources out there, and you're not not alone. Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next time.